During a session in the Senate earlier today, Virginia Senator Tim Kaine made remarks on the government shutdown and the impact it's having on some of his constituents.
Mr. President, I rise today to discuss where we stand as a nation and as a Senate on day 28 of the longest shutdown in the history of the United States government. Following my comments, I will offer by UC to pull one of the House bills up, and I understand the Senator from Oklahoma will be here to respond to that. We were not scheduled to be in session today. We were supposed to adjourn yesterday and then reconvene on Monday, January 28th. But I objected to the adjournment because our government is closed, just as I did last weekend. And so we'll be in today and tomorrow, off Sunday and Monday in honor of Martin Luther King Jr., and then returning on Tuesday, January 22. I offer a partial apology to my colleagues and to our professional Senate staff for any inconvenience they experience because we will be in session during a time where there had been a scheduled recess. I have never objected to the normal weekly adjournment before last week, and I cannot imagine doing so under normal circumstances. But my apology is only partial because the inconvenience experienced by anyone in this chamber, Senate or professional staff, pales in comparison to the pain that this shutdown inflicts upon workers who are not getting paid, citizens who are not being served, and a nation whose reputation is being damaged. We're made to look like a laughingstock by this needless shutdown, and the enemies of America around the world are enjoying this immensely, just as our allies are deeply worried about us. Despite what some believe and despite the impression that some may draw from recent history in the Article I branch, I do not believe the shuttering of the government of the United States is a normal circumstance. And I, for one, will do anything I can to fight against the normalization of the status we find ourselves in today. That's why I'm here today. That's why I will be here tomorrow. That's why I'll be here all next week. If our government is closed, I will be here trying to open it. I'm only one senator, and I lack the power to compel anyone else to be here with me other than the presider. I lack the power to force a floor vote to reopen government. I lack the power to call up any legislative matter for a vote, save the two House bills which we have agreed may be called up pursuant to the UC rules. But I do have the power to talk every day with my colleagues and the administration officials to encourage the reopening of our government. And I do have the power to stand on the floor and describe the circumstances of my constituents and all Americans who are being needlessly hurt. Only a few will hear me as I describe their pain, but describe it I will, and the congressional record will record for all history their stories. If you want me to share your story in the days to come as I take the floor, please reach out to my office at kaine.senate.gov, where you will see a way to share your shutdown story, and I will try to share as many of these as I can in the days to come. Today, before I offer the UC on the Homeland Security short-term bill, I want to do two things. I first want to elaborate upon a point I made briefly yesterday about the cardinal illogic of this shutdown. And second, I want to share stories just from meetings that I had yesterday with affected federal employees and veterans. The cardinal logic of this shutdown has at least three levels. The cause of the shutdown is clear. President Trump does not believe $1.3 billion for border security funding contained in a bipartisan appropriation bill is sufficient. He says, I want more. And he's willing to shut down massive sections of the American government to get more. President Trump is not only willing to do this, he says he is proud to do this, even for weeks and months. And he invited cameras into a meeting with congressional leaders and told America that he is the sole responsible party for it. The first level of illogic to the shutdown is this. Most of the employees and citizens affected by the shutdown have absolutely nothing to do with the debate over the right appropriations level for border security. What does the debate about border security have to do with the food stamp program and those who work for it? What does it have to do with the National Park Service? What does it have to do with the Environmental Protection Agency, with the Chemical Safety Board, with the Internal Revenue Service, with national forests, with mental health services or domestic violence programs funded through Department of Justice grants, with affordable housing programs administered by HUD? Hundreds of thousands of workers and millions of citizens who are served by the affected agencies are being punished, locked out of their jobs, deprived paycheck, turned away from services, because the president believes that if he punishes enough people, even those unconnected with the legitimate issue at hand, he will get what he wants. This is tyrant behavior, not presidential behavior. The illogic of this form of punishment struck me most vividly yesterday when I moved to reopen these unaffected agencies, and Leader McConnell objected to my UC request. Mr. President, one of the agencies covered by my UC request was the Executive Office of the President of the United States. At the White House, many of the President's own chosen staff are furloughed or they're working without pay during the shutdown. So I stood on the floor as a Democrat to ask that the President's own staff be allowed to return to work to serve him, to serve the country, and to be paid. But the majority leader, having previously described his motivation as trying to support the president, stood and objected to the motion that would have returned the president's own staff to work. You can't make this stuff up. The second level of illogic of this shutdown concerns the core of the policy dispute, the appropriations level for border security. The UC request that I will offer in a few minutes deals with that part of the dispute that's pending before the body. I will offer in a few minutes the UC on the House bill that would reopen for a short term the Homeland Security agencies that provide security while Congress tries to find a bipartisan deal that can pass both houses and earn the president's signature. And Senate Republicans, again in a few minutes, at the request of President Trump, who does not yet want this to happen, will object to that request as well. Mr. President, if the issue in dispute is border security, or as President Trump often says, quote, the safety and security of the American people, he says that in speeches, he says that in tweets, that's the issue, then why punish the very people who are providing that safety and security? How does it help promote safety and security to not pay the very Border Patrol agents charged with protecting the border? How does it promote safety and security to not pay FBI agents, DEA agents, federal prosecutors, ATF agents, and U.S. Marshals? How does it promote safety and security to not pay members of the Coast Guard who help interdict drugs and also rescue Americans endangered at sea? How does it promote safety and security to not pay TSA agents who keep dangerous people off planes, or air traffic controllers who keep air traffic safely coordinated in American skies? The president has proudly taken paychecks away from the very professionals who he asks to guard the safety and security of the American public every day, and in doing so, he has made our citizens and our country less safe and less secure. The third level of illogic is a consequence of actions that were taken by Congress and the president in the last week. And for this, I want to offer thanks to my colleagues. I was able, through use of my adjournment objection last week, to negotiate a successful vote on a bill guaranteeing back pay to all workers affected by this or any future shutdown. I appreciate the cooperation of all my Senate colleagues, the majority leader, the minority leader, and others, and the House in this effort, and I appreciate that President Trump signed the bill in the last few days. But, Mr. President, having guaranteed back pay, we're now faced with an unusual question about continuing the shutdown. Now that we know that the federal Treasury will stroke checks to all affected workers to make them whole, at least for the salary that they've lost, wouldn't we rather have them at work serving their fellow Americans rather than locked out of their offices and unable to serve them? What sense does it make to guarantee payment but prohibit them from doing the work for which they are paid? These workers want to go back to work because they want to serve their fellow citizens. And that brings me to the second part of my remarks before I offer the UC. I had 3 meetings yesterday with large groups of Virginians where I listened to them talk about the shutdown. 2 of the meetings were actually specifically designed to hear from federal employees about the shutdown. One was an annual coffee that Senator Warner and I have for veterans to just celebrate their service to the country, and as they were waiting in line and taking pictures, they were talking to us a lot about the shutdown. In these 3 instances, I heard an awful lot. And just as I'll share stories next week, let me now just summarize a few of the things I heard from those that I interacted with yesterday and just tell you about them. The mother of a newborn, a 6-monther, who works as an air traffic controller, who can't afford to pay her babysitter. She's working but getting no salary. She started to cry because she said, I have to go to work and I can't pay a babysitter, so the only thing I can do, because I'm not calling in sick, the only thing I can do is send my baby to my mother's who lives in another state. And she started to cry. My baby is 6 months old. I've never been away from my baby for more than 8 hours. I don't want to be away from my child. And how long is it going to go on? I may be away from my child for weeks. And she teared up as she told us about this. The federal employee who said, quote, I signed up to serve Americans but didn't realize that I was being drafted into a political war that I had no interest in being part of, a war in which federal employees are used as hostages. A young married couple, both federal employees, working without pay, holding their newborn tiny baby in their arms and tearing up as they talked about their uncertainty over paying their mortgage and other bills. The furloughed federal employee whose wife is a disabled veteran with PTSD but is postponing her mental health appointments because of her inability to pay co-pays or pay for medications. The 2 federal employee couple whose 4- and 6-year-old children, hearing in the background the news on TV and hearing their parents' anxious discussions at night, came up to them the day after Christmas, each holding their piggy banks and giving them to their parents and saying, maybe you guys need these piggy banks now more than we do. The veteran who has successfully created an entrepreneurial government contracting business who has hundreds of employees that are out of work because of the shutdown. All of these people express this, their love for public service, their desire to continue public service, and their personal pain at feeling disrespected just because they want to provide public service. A repeated concern expressed by so many of them about the backlog that's on their desk. They think they'll be back at some point, but it was really interesting. Sitting on my desk was this piece of work that I really wanted to get done, and how much more is going to be there, and it'll be hard to serve people, and they'll be mad because the backlog is so big. They're having anxiety about not being able to serve people well because the backlog will grow during these now 4 weeks of the shutdown. And then a deep concern expressed by so many. Why would any young person want to go into public service? Why would any young person with a heart for public service want to do that as a federal employee? Mr. President, before I offer the UC, I see my colleague from Oklahoma is here. I just want to tell one last story that for some reason of all the ones yesterday, this was the one that really just stuck with me. There were others that might have been more dire, but this one sort of stuck with me because I think it exemplifies a spirit that I see in so many of our federal workers. An employee of the National Park Service who has been with the Park Service for about 10 years. His job is to physically maintain the space around the White House, groundskeeping, trash removal. anything, as he says, anything he can do to make those grounds around the White House look really fantastic. And he described why he loves his job. And it wasn't sort of the tasks that he does. He said, I want school children visiting Washington, D.C., and I want international visitors visiting Washington, D.C., when they come to the White House to be able to look at this and see it and feel impressed with the United States of America. And it makes me feel proud when I see the reaction on people's faces as they are there in front of the White House. That's how he described his work. He is furloughed and without pay. So he's home. There are news accounts coming about, trash overflowing at national parks and things like that, and that kind of causes him angst, obviously. And he's angry about the situation. He didn't mince any words with me as he described it. But last Sunday morning, he got a call, and it was, hey, we need you to come shovel snow. We had snow last weekend in D.C. We had a lot of snow, 10 inches of snow. You got to come in and shovel snow. You're not being paid. I know you feel the disrespect of being furloughed, and we're not going to be able to pay you for shoveling snow, but can you come in and shovel snow on a Sunday so that at least the walkways are clear in front of the White House? He said, boy, I really had something that I wanted to say on that call. I wanted to say no, but then I thought about this. What if somebody, because of the snow, like a kid, falls and breaks their leg, or there's an accident or something because the sidewalks aren't clear, or there's ice that causes some problem? And he started to think about the people that he cares about, that he wants to be impressed by the White House because he wants them to be impressed by the country. And he said, well, I guess I better go shovel the snow. I kid you not, we were having this conversation about 11:45 yesterday morning, and some of you have seen that there's a weather report this weekend that's a little bit iffy in D.C., and during the middle of his telling me his story, his phone rang, and he looked at it, and he said, yeah, that's my boss. I'm not going to answer it. I know why he's calling. I said, did you just time this as a stage effect because you knew you were meeting with me right now? Did you tell him not to call at 10:30 and call at 11:30 instead? He said, no. I know what this call is about. It's that they need me this weekend, even though I'm being disrespected, even though I'm not being paid, and no matter what I want to say, I know what I'm going to say. I'm going to say, yes, I will come in and make sure that this White House, this Capitol, this country looks as beautiful as it can look for these school children and these visitors. I think we have to up our game, Mr. President, all of us. I know we can do this. We owe it to our citizens. We owe it to our workers. We owe it to our nation's reputation. And so with that, Mr. President, I would ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 6, H.J. Res. 1, making further continuing appropriations for the Department of Homeland Security. I further ask that the joint resolution be considered read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
On behalf of the Majority Leader, I object.
The objection's heard.
Mr. President, I yield the floor, and I note the absence of quorum.
In the last half hour, President Trump, speaking from the White House, proposed a legislative compromise in an effort to end the nearly month-long